Hi everybody, this is Apex Insider and I'm your host, Maryann Simson. This week we're going to be talking about content for in-flight entertainment systems, more specifically the content delivery ecosystem. That means we'll be talking about how the great films, TV shows, audio libraries, and destination content that make long flights more enjoyable find their way on board, and how the airline and entertainment industries can work together to make this process faster, easier, and more economical. Apex Insider is made possible by the support of Global Eagle. Bring the world to you. Our guest this week is Steve Sharman. He is the director of Hackthorn Innovations, and he's a consultant and specialist in content management and delivery workflows. Welcome to the show, Steve.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. Thank you so much for coming. So Steve, in a nutshell, what are some of the challenges surrounding the content delivery space generally right now?
So the world's changed so much in the past few years. If you kind of look at where things are going, we've got so much more content going onto so many more different devices in so many different formats. And content is a funny industry. It's traditionally been very, very focused on kind of almost like cottage industries where you've got very small players dealing with their own little part of the ecosystem, so versioning and languaging and so on and so forth. Now we're in a world where people want to see their content in their format on their own devices. We can't do that anymore. So the big issue is trying to shift the industry to being more of a kind of supply chain, to being an industrialized process.
Okay, and how do changing consumer viewing habits, I guess, sort of add to this challenge?
So in a couple of different ways, really. I mean, one is commercially. I mean, you're competing for so much for space with so many different other services right now. So you've got TV, you've got radio, you've got games, you've got social media. So actually getting a share of mind is quite difficult. And then of course you've got all of the problems of delivering to all those different devices. And one of the kind of big problems with that, if you're in the content delivery space, is that if the content is in some way wrong, that's your fault. So say you're watching the BBC iPlayer on your tablet, if it buffers or it doesn't work properly, it doesn't matter that you're kind of watching this stuff on a crappy cell phone connection from a beach in Thailand. It's the BBC's fault, and it's the same problem with the airlines. You know, if you haven't got the entertainment that you want in the way that you want it, it's not great quality. It's the airline's fault.
Right. So obviously content delivery is getting more tricky. So how is this sort of challenge compounded when your exhibition site or the place where you're watching it is on a moving target like an airplane?
So so my background is kind of traditional entertainment, so delivering to kind of set-top boxes and TVs and so on. And actually, one of the really interesting things is that talking to my friends and colleagues in the airline industry, it's the same set of problems, because you've got lots of different in-flight entertainment systems. You've got to package the content in the right way. You've got to send the right metadata. You've got to make sure that the material that you send out is complied in the right way. So you've got to make sure that you haven't got nudity on some flights and in some territories and so on and so forth. The only way we can start to solve those problems is through automation, taking hands off the content, starting to kind of bring the content to the work to the content rather than shipping the content around the world and so on and so forth.
Interesting. So you mentioned that you've been speaking to some people in the aviation industry. Can you reveal who that might be?
Yeah, so I've got some good colleagues that work at Global Eagle, and I think that they're doing some really interesting stuff, because they're kind of a couple of things really. One is they have started to really look at this whole issue as a supply chain, and have started to kind of look outside the narrow confines of the airline industry into the general entertainment world. So, for example, they're working quite closely with a company called STVI. And those guys are, they're kind of a startup, but they're a startup which is pretty well funded to deliver content to people like Fox and Discovery and Turner and using things like the Amazon cloud to solve problems with scaling and moving content around the world. But I think the other thing that's interesting talking to the Global Eagle guys is that they're seeing this. It's not just a technical problem. It's you've got to kind of reorganize to make sure that the operation is there to deliver the content and to support the automation without losing that really important kind of personal contact that I think in the entertainment industry it's always been a very personal industry, and that's my impression of the airline industry too, very much built on relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, talking about relationships, a lot of airlines sort of want to own the end-to-end passenger experience, and I think some of them are really beginning to look at all this great content that they've been licensing as a way to extend that passenger relationship by allowing the passenger to start the movie before the flight or finish the movie after the flight. Why hasn't this become more prevalent?
I think that there's a really glib answer, which is because it's hard. I think again, but again, I think there are commercial issues and sort of technical issues. So if you think about, we struggle with that in the kind of the wider entertainment industry anyway. So you've got people who you're watching at home, you want to take where you are onto the device and watch it on the train and so on and so forth. But I think you've got kind of compounded problems in the airline industry. So if you're just take for example, you've kind of got commercial issues. If you're licensing for a flight and then you're suddenly starting to watch the content in one country and then watch it at the other end in a different country, what does your rights deal have to look like? The wider entertainment technology sector and the airline entertainment sector too.
Cool. Okay, let's talk a little bit about data. Data. Who owns the passenger data? Who owns the relationship? Who gets to use that? What would you say the main disputes or challenges are there right now?
It's a real tricky one, isn't it? Because I think the first thing that people start with saying, well, I've got to own the data, but then they can't necessarily understand why they need to own the data and the relationship. And if there's one area that I think that the rest of the entertainment industry hasn't really cracked yet, it's that whole thing. If you look at how the industry is going right now, you've got say Netflix and Amazon, and you've got people like Disney starting to pull their content away from those wide platforms so that they can start to have a direct relationship with their consumers. Same with major kind of broadcasters as well. It's a big issue we kind of haven't really cracked yet. Integration demands and so on. And I think there's an element of the consumer experience as well. So if I'm getting an airline, do I want to kind of log into the airline portal and register my data to be able to watch content, or would I prefer to log on to Airline Tunes? So is there a place for a body which is going to kind of manage identity and share data out across the industry? This is something which everybody's grappling with, and I think nobody's got a great answer to it yet. And I think probably the folks that do come with a great answer to it will make a great deal of money.
Okay, well, we'll watch and see who that is. All right, and then finally, what is happening out there right now that, looks like it could be sort of the golden ticket to solving some of these problems in terms of technology or new processes?
There's some really interesting stuff out there which varies from the absolutely stultifyingly dull. So one of the big issues that we've got with it, just take the space that I work in a lot, which is the UK broadcast space. One of our biggest bugbears always is every single video on demand platform in the UK is completely different. We can't just package up our information, our content once and send it out. It's the same with the studios and so on. So there's some stuff being done around a format called IMF, which is a way of actually packaging material, video and audio and so on, in a way that it can take into account things like cuts for different airlines or cuts for different territories and so on, and make it really easy to produce and deal with content. So as I say, that's really interesting, but it's really interesting for people like me, generally speaking quite dull. But there are other areas where we're seeing technology really start to kind of reduce the cost of operation and get people working together a lot more. So for example, using the public cloud, so people like Amazon, Microsoft Azure and so on, I don't know of a single content provider, entertainment provider, that isn't actually moving their content as quickly as they can into some kind of public cloud environment, so they can take advantage of scale, so turning it into different formats quickly, delivering it around the world quickly, and also bringing all the different partners that need to work on it to one place. And then there are things like in the outside world, there's a tremendous amount of interest in things like artificial intelligence, so AI. So we've seen instances, for example, where if you're versioning a piece of content, generally old world, you have to sit and watch it and look for things like nudity or smoking, or whatever it is. You can kind of program a computer now to look for those things. Yeah, so we're assisting the people. We're not replacing people, but we're certainly helping them do their job better and faster. Yeah, very much so. And I think that's that's what technology should be about. It's funny, you'll never get a technologist to admit it, but I'm kind of admitting it to the world now. Is that computers never replace anybody. Anytime you put in a system go in to save people, you always end up with more people. But AI in particular now has the ability to really let people move away from those sort of really boring little tasks to really adding value and making their job more interesting and more fun. It's really quite exciting.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much, Steve, for joining us.
My pleasure.
Where can people find you?
So you can find me on email at steve@hackthorn.ai. I'm available on LinkedIn, and you can also find me on Twitter, which is, the handle is @thesharmanator, where you mainly find me tweeting pictures of airplanes.
Perfect. I think our audience will love that. And you guys can also follow the Airline Passenger Experience Association on all the social medias that Steve mentioned, and make sure you subscribe to this channel for more great aviation content. Thank you, and see you next time.